You're on.
Hi, Elkanah Shmotkin. Louder already? This is the chazan. With the chazan's voice telling me I need to be louder. I'll do my best. So tomorrow night is Chavav, the 75th yard site of the Rebbe's father. And just wanted to share, was asked to share a little bit about his life. So, I have here somebody who was with us on the early years experience last year. What I enjoy doing is kind of filling in some of the blanks of things that are maybe a little bit less known, with the hope that people know some of the kind of the regular information, but I like to fill in some interesting details to the best of my ability. So we'll share some vignettes from the life of the Rebbe's father. Feel free to ask questions, to discuss, to slug up, whatever. And maybe we'll even get a chance. I was told this is usually a shir, so maybe if we have the opportunity, we'll also share some actual Torah from the Rebbe's father. So, the Rebbe's father was born and grew up in Podebranka in Russia. It's a small city. His parents were Rebbe Schneerson and Rebbe Rachel. And he was Nischanech. His Zayde, Rebbe Rachel's father was Reb Zalman Chaikin. He was a Gvir. He lived in Podebranka, and he was the Rav of the city. His uncle was Reb Yoel, and he was his main teacher. I'm sorry, it's his uncle who was a Gvir. His grandfather was the Rav of the city, and his uncle, Reb Yoel, was a big Gvir. Just to give you an idea of the environment that the Rebbe's father was growing up in, kind of, with the Zayda, obviously the Rav of the city, and with his uncle being the Gvir. Rabbi Yoel had a very open house. Poor people used to come, they would move in, they would park for as long as they pleased, weeks, months, as long as they wanted. They fed them, they would let them live there. And the way it would work was whoever was the senior ani would become the kitchen manager. So he would manage the kitchen, make sure to feed all the others, and he took control of the situation. So at one point the senior ani moved on, and the next fellow came to take him over, and he instituted some rules. This is not Hefker over here. There are meal times. We only use the front door. No one comes in the back door, straight into the kitchen. This is, it's my space. So one time he was working there, and in walked Rabbi Yoel. I feel like I'm mixing up the Zayda and Rabbi Yoel. Anyway, in walked Rabbi Yoel, and the ani, who did not know that this happened to have been the Gvir, the owner of the house, starts shouting at him, "What are you doing? I made rules. You come in the front door. Was for a chutzpah, a seder is a seder." Anyway, he politely shook his head and apologized and walked around to come in the front door of his house. There was I think it was an LNS that was written in the early Nuns, it might have been Tafshin Nun, which described the Rebbe's father. And what was written was, he was also active in many areas affecting the Jewish community, attending many rabbinical conferences called by the Lubavitch Rebbe of that day, the Rebbe Rashab, with whom Rebbe Levi Yitschok had very close ties. So the Rebbe made two edits to this. He said, first of all, the Rebbe added he had close personal ties. In other words, he wasn't just a close chassid, but he also had very close personal ties. And the other thing was, the Rebbe added after the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe wrote, the Rebbe Rashab Nishmas Eden, Sharav Levi Yitschok Haya Chasidoi Hachi Masur. That the Rebbe's father was the most devoted chassid of the Rebbe Rashab. And really, when you learn about his life story, that really defined much of who he was, certainly his early life. And the Rebbe says that later also his iskashrus moved over to the Frierdiker Rebbe, but his main kesher was with the Rebbe Rashab in a very personal way. When the Rebbe was born, I'm sure many of us know this, when the Rebbe was born, the Rebbe Rashab sent to Chasidoi Hachi Masur, to the Rebbe's father, 6 telegrams to the Rebbe's parents within the short time after the Rebbe's birth, with instructions of how to handle the new baby. one of which Rabbi Elkanah told to Rebbe Elkanah was that that the Rebbe's father instructed me to wash Negelwasser always before I would feed him, something that he did not instruct her by the Rebbe's younger brothers. In other words, this was understood to be at least one of the things that were in the telegram. He learned for about 8 years by his shver. So the shidduch. The Rebbe Rashab was the Rebbe's parents' shadchan. And the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, we'll get to it later, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes in a long obituary that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote for him, what kind of iskashus he had to the Rebbe Rashab. And he made the shidduch. There was a story that I heard, I can't remember from whom, but it was a reliable source, that toward the beginning of the marriage, there was a bit of a dispute, that Rebbe Elkanah wanted to have a mirror in the house, and the Rebbe's father, Al Pi Kabbalah, for some reason there wasn't supposed to be a mirror. So they went to the Rebbe Rashab to mediate it, and the Rebbe Rashab said it should be the way Rebbe Elkanah wanted. But everything that he did was Al Pi Kabbalah. Even by the Rebbe's bris, he spoke in Yonim in Kabbalah in his unique style, which hopefully we'll get a bit of a chance to learn about. And one of the things he explained was Al Pi Kabbalah why the Rebbe's bris was on his own, the Rebbe's father's 24th birthday. Schneerson, the Rebbe's father's birthday, was the day of the Rebbe's bris. So for 8 years he sat and learned and wrote. The Ashara is based on what we've heard, thousands of pages, which unfortunately we don't have today. Maybe one day they'll still show up. But just to fast forward, one time he visited Leningrad, right after the Frierdiker Rebbe left Leningrad, left Russia, and some of the Chassidim were harassing him. Where does this come from, this unique style? You're combining all parts of the Torah and throwing in Kabbalah, like Vuzgert Gevar Nazazach. Well, I should say, first a bunch of Chassidim went to visit him, kind of to be Makabel Panov, and he sat down and he spoke for hours and hours in Yonim in Kabbalah. So at some point, they said, like, Michal Dvorkin actually asked him, "Wann nimmt das alles?" So he says, "Macht mir übergegeben." Aber wie kann man so viel übergeben? How can somebody give you this much to give over? So he said, the klalim were given over to me, and from there, I take it on my own. So the understanding amongst Chassidim was that the Rebbe Rashab either gave him or endorsed this Seder Limud, which you don't see anywhere. Not that I'm the big expert on the Rebbe, on Kabbalah, but it's absolutely fascinating, the Rebbe's father's style. And I just want to tell you that over the last number of years that I'm learning more about the Rebbe's early life and therefore about the Rebbe's father, I want to tell you that the Rebbe's father's Torah, to most of us, certainly to me, it's very intimidating. You open a Lekutei Levi Yitschok, there's these long pages with no break, and you try and read a word and you don't understand. But I want to tell you that it's really, first of all, don't be scared, don't be so intimidated, especially now. There are people who are being mefaneachet. Rabbi David Dubov has made this his life's mission to be mefaneach and to explain the Rebbe's father's Torahs, but I want you to know that they're absolutely fascinating. And you pashat see in every Gemara, in every Pasuk Chumash, in anything throughout Torah, he finds exactly why it all fits together perfectly, by Gematria, by the name of the Tana, and you say, wow, 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 as you go through it. It's really fascinating. So last year when we were on this early years experience trip, we had with us Rabbi Leibel Shapiro, and he is an Einikol of Reb Zalman Vilenkin. By the way, we have with us somebody who's named after Reb Zalman Vilenkin, is Einikol Rabbi Zalman Shapiro, and he was the Rebbe's Melamed, as we're going to see shortly. But anyway, so Rabbi Shapiro was telling us we got a special entry to the KGB building, the first place that the Rebbe's father was when he was arrested. The first place he sat in prison for a short time, till they transferred him. And on the way, I asked him, please tell us a Torah from the Rebbe's father. And he said the following Torah that he heard from his Zayda. It's not printed anywhere, but he heard this directly from his Zayda, who was the Rebbe's Melamed, and so obviously had a close relationship with the Rebbe's father. So I'll try and share it. Let's see if we can all follow. Somebody by a Fabrengen tried to stump, or at least to ask a question of the Rebbe's father. He said there's a Medrash Pliya And it says that a Tana or a Meira asked another Tana or a Meira, Ma Shmoi Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he responded, Rachmana Liba Boy. So the first Tana asked, so why are they all in order? Mipnei Ma Kulam Stures V'zu Afucha. Amar Lai Chesam Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chesam Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Emes. Hado Dichsiv Yesh Echad Ve'ein Sheni Gam Ben V'ach Ein Lai. Go make sense out of that, right? He said, what's the Eibishter's name? He responded, Rachmana Liba Boy. The Eibishter wants your heart. So the first Tana asked back, so why are they all in order and this one's reversed? So he said, the stamp of the Eibishter is truth, like it says in the Pasuk, in Kehelis, Yesh Echad Ve'en Sheni Gam Ben V'ach Ein Lai. So immediately, so this guy, asked him, what does this Medrash mean? So immediately, the Rebbe's father explained. It's Yedua and Sifrei Kabbalah that there are 4 names of the Eibishter, Ma, Ban, Sag, Ab. The gematria of all of them together is Reish Lamed Beis. Rachamana Liba Boy. Reish Lamed Beis. That's the starting point. That's what's the name of the Eibishter? Reish Lamed Beis. Those 4 names. Rachmana Liba Boy. Then he goes on. Why are they all in order and this one is reversed? All of the names Ma, Sag, and Ab, the 10s come before the 1s, right? Mem, then Hey. Mem is 40, then Hey is 5, right? So all the 10s come before the 1s. But by Ban, it's the other way. First the Bays, first the 1s, and then the Nun, then the 10s. Why is it that way? So the answer is, Chesame Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Emes. Emes, in Misper Katan, if you take the Aleph, and the Mem, you turn it into 4, and the Tuf, you turn it into 4, right? Take the 40 and make it 4. It's called Misper Katan. It's one of the ways of Gematria. So Emes is 9 also, right? Aleph, Mem would be 4, Tuf would be 4, so it's 9. The number 9 is special in that every combination of the number 9, as we know, also equals 9. If you do 9 times 1, it's 9. 9 times 2, 18. Etc. 27, 36, it always adds up to 9. So 9 is a very symmetrical number, right? So too with these shemis of the Eibishter. Ma is 9. Sag is 9. Ab is 9. What happens when we come to the last one of them? Which one is it that doesn't add up? Ban. Doesn't make sense. It doesn't work, right? So if we do Nab, it's 7. It doesn't work. But when you flip it over and it's called Ban, so this is something that probably most of us don't know, I certainly didn't. In addition to the gematria of the main letters, there's also a different gematria for the Oisias Seifias, for a Shlas Mem, a Langinon, they have a different. And in that Cheshbon, a Mem is, a Langa Chaf is 500, a Mem is 600, a Nun is 700. So Ban, if you put it in that order, and the Nun becomes a Langa Nun, suddenly you have 7 and 2, and it works out to 9. So then all of the names of the Eibishter all add up to 9. And that's why it says, Yesh Echad Ve'en Sheni, Gam Ben V'ach Ein Lai. Shem Ban is different from all the other Shemis. There's nothing else like it. And so here's how you're mefarish the pasuk. Echad is Emes. And it's masim to the gematria of the names. Because it's Emes b'misper katan, 9. So then the pasuk goes on to Ben. Why is Ban backwards? Ben, question mark. The answer is, Lefisha v'ach ein loy. Ach, Aleph Ches, it would be missing the number 9. Ach ein loy, you wouldn't have the number 9 if it was written as Nab. So it has to be Ban. That's why Ban is the other way. Anyway, this is a Torah of the Rebbe's father, a short one. There are obviously much longer ones on Psukim, or on, just for example, before the Rebbe's Chasna, he writes to the Rebbe a letter. He quotes every time it says Bayem HaShlishi in the Torah, and he explains how it's Yichud Zun. Bayem HaShlishi Vatil Vashester Malchus Vahi Bayem HaShlishi. In Tanakh, I believe. I think it's everyone in the entire Tanakh. So all of a sudden you see the how everything in Torah fits together beautifully. Anyway, I'm not going to claim that I'm the scholar in the Rebbe's father's Torah, but I would really urge you, don't be intimidated by the style. Try looking at it, especially now that there are these things coming out that make it very simple and it's very geschmack. Anyway, after 8 years of living in Nikolaev, where the Rebbe's father was writing and learning Torah, the Rebbe Elkanah writes that we're being supported by my parents for this entire time. It became time to think about a source of parnasa. So he started considering shtelas of rabbanos in several places. So there was a certain city that wanted him to learn Russian officially. It was part of getting a diploma, the equivalent of 5 years of high school. Took him a few months to learn Russian, and when he was learning, she says he was learning in the tune of Gemara. He was learning the Russian. Now the exams were being held in Kiev, so he traveled there, and he arranged for a place to sleep and food, whatever. But when he came there in the morning to start taking the test, he saw that the curriculum that he was about to take a test for in the Russian, part of the curriculum was that he learn an old church language, Slavonic, and the Christian scripture. So he didn't even register for the examinations. That very day he got on the train and he came home in time for our son Label's bris. So this would have been Iyar Tafresh Samach Vav, 1906. Now there are letters from the Rebbe Rashab trying to get him shtelas. One of them is to Rostov, the city of Rostov. Before he ended up where he did, the Rebbe Rashab was advocating very hard that a city should take him as a Rebbe. Now you have to realize he was 20, how old was he? He was, let's say in those years, 28. Never had a shtela. Rostov is a pretty big city. But there's letters from the Rebbe Rashab pushing. It's the best thing for your city. Anyway, and then there's the famous thing that the city wanted him to get smicha from Reb Chaim Brisker. And there's the famous story that the Rebbe tells on a number of occasions that when, first of all, the Rebbe says when he walked in the door, Reb Chaim saw that he was a chassid from the way he was dressed. He really didn't want to have to give him smicha, so he really made his life difficult, which I never really understood because the Rebbe said how Reb Chaim Brisker was a Yidid. I mean, it's known was a Yidid of the Rebbe Rashab, but anyway, the Rebbe says the story this way. So. I guess he wanted to matter him, at least if he's going to give him smicha, to make sure he's really, he knows what he's doing. The Rebbe says that after a while, and he tested him, and he saw Zeret Hazegut Gekent, he was so surprised, he said, it's very interesting because there's a tape of this when the Rebbe says it. I'm going to say Tafshin Yudalad, I think, it's the beginning of the fourth Sikha, very interesting, you find it on Ashrenu.app. And you hear the Rebbe saying it, and the Rebbe says the story, and Reb Chaim Brisker said to my father, Gewald, and the Rebbe pauses for a second, then he says his father's name. Gewald Reb Levik, Azagut Kap in Vasatir das Areingelegt. You have such a good mind, you have such a good head, and you're putting it into Kabbalah and Chassidus, but this was because he passed the test for Rabbanis with flying colors. Anyway, but then he was there for Shimush. And the way it works with Shimush is you sit with the Rav, the Shailas come in for the Rav, and the Rav turns to the potential Musmach and he puts the Shailas to them. So with Shabbos, the Rebbe says it was either Chol Hamoed Sukkos or Shabbos Sukkos, Yom Tov. And Shaila came in, people came running, there's no Eruv, we forgot to make an Eruv, can we carry to the Sukkah? And he put the question to the Rebbe's father, and he said, the Sukkah Alein is Ma'ariv, the Sukkah itself is an Eruv, we're talking about Eruv Chatzeres, where you need to be Mshatef in a Suda, and it's a good Eruv. And Reb Chaim liked the answer and endorsed it. And the Rebbe goes, it just seems, what's so interesting to me is, many times in Chafav, you see the Rebbe using his father's Derech HaLimud. The Rebbe goes and explains the entire story of Avodas Sa'adam. Long story short, lack of making an Eruv comes from Sinas Chinam. Now, there's Eruv means that we're all participating together in one thing. That's why an Eruv works, right? You forgot to make an Eruv. The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya that Shikha comes from a ras somewhere there, Ba'emek, whatever. So during the weekday, you forget, comes Shabbos, and you're in a higher matzav, you come remembering, Gewald, you come to the Rav, I want to have Avos Yisrael, I want to have an Eruv. Anyway, the Rebbe explains the whole thing about Avodas Sa'adam. So he says the Sukkah is Ma'ariv, don't worry. Ruyim Kol Yisrael Leisha B'Sukkah Achas. Sukkah is something that everybody can be Ba'achdus in, the Sukkah is Ma'ariv. Anyway, but that story of Reb Chaim Brisker is nice. So in Taf Reish Samach Ches or so. Yeah, the end of Tafresh Samach Ches. The senior Rav in Yekaterinoslav, a city not that far from Nikolaev where he was living, passed away. And the Rebbe Rashab very much wanted that a Chassidish Rav should take his place. And he started advocating and pushing that the Rebbe's father should be given the shtela. Now, Dnepr is actually a very big and very chashuv city in Ukraine. And once again, we have somebody here who was never even a Rav officially in a position. And the Rebbe Rashab is pushing. I know him well. This is the best thing for your city. Now, in the city, just so we understand, the city was not a Chassidish shtetl. There were Zionists. There were a lot of anti-religious movements. There were Misnagdim. There were communists. Well, I'm sorry, communists came later. This is Tsarist time still. And there was a lot of people fighting that he should not become the Rebbe. Rebbe Elkanah writes about this at length. I'm not going to go into it too long. But at the end of the day, he was voted in. They had two Rabbanim, and he was the Chassidish Rav. Just a couple of incidents right when he came that show kind of his tkifus and his. Right when he came, he checked out the mikveh. He did not like what he saw, so he started pushing the community. We need to fix the mikveh. We need to upgrade it. They were schlepping their feet. We don't have money. He had a very expensive coat, and he said, "B'seder Chevra, I'm selling my coat." And that'll be a good start for redoing the mikveh. So when they saw, you have to realize, many of the official community was not even necessarily frum, many of the people. Some were less frum, some more frum. But when they saw that, how serious he is, they very quickly put together the money for the mikveh. There's another story, this one Rebbe Elkanah writes, where not long after he arrived, he went one day to check out the shechita, and he checked the shechet's knife, and it wasn't good. So on the spot, he fired him. Now, there was an older Rav in the city for 30 years, and he liked this shechet. So it became a whole political outcry. How could he just push him away like that? It wasn't fair, he didn't do anything wrong, and the Rebbe's father stood his ground. There's no way. So they made a whole big din Torah. And at the din Torah, there came an aide who was just passing through the city on that day, and he had punkt been in the shlachtos, and he saw that the Rebbe's father fired him for no good reason. So after he started speaking, the Rebbe's father started saying, "Hey, you're not somebody passing by. You're Reb David. You put on a disguise. You're one of the old Rav's friends." Anyway, he put on big fat glasses and he dyed his beard brown, and they left embarrassed. But Rebbe Elkanah says, just to see that after this story, it hurt him so much what went on over there that he was in bed for 2 weeks. He got sick from it. Now, shortly after they came to Dnepr, the Rebbe was then 6.5. His younger brothers would have been about 4 and 3, or 4.5 and 3.5. The Rebbe went to Reb Zalman Vilenkin, who was a shaychet in the city, and said, "Would you please teach my children?" The Rebbe's father, said, "Would you please teach my children?" And Reb Zalman was not very happy about this. First of all, I think the main reason that I was told is a shaychet is a much better paying job than a malamed. It's also, I guess, in those days a more chashuv job. And he was not very happy about this demotion that he was getting. But the Rebbe's father, I believe he told him something on the lines of, if I recall correctly, like, "Don't worry about it, you're not going to regret it." But before he started teaching him, the Rebbe's father said to him, it says in the Gemara, that the Melamed of the Bnei Rav was Reb Shmuel Bar Shilas. There's a whole story, the Rebbe speaks sichas about it, how he was once sitting in the garden and somebody came to him, "You're a Melamed, how could you be relaxing?" So he said, "Wherever I am, my mind is on my Talmidim." But the Gemara says that Reb Shmuel Bar Shilas was a Melamed. Shilas is Rosh Tevis Shivisi Hashem Lenegdi Samid. A Melamed always has to know that his starting point is from Shivisi. But however, the Rebbe says, and Reb Zalman said it too, that the Rebbe's primary teacher was his father. And in fact, in a Chafa Fabrengen, I'll tell you a couple quick stories about it. First of all, he started off, Reb Zalman said that the first thing he learned with the Rebbe was Gemara Be'ah. And in the beginning, he was skipping some of the harder Taisvasim. But the Rebbe asked him if he could please teach him all the Taisvasim and not to skip. One time, the Rebbe's father was sitting and speaking Kabbalah publicly, and it was over most people. Nobody really could understand. No normal people could understand. So somebody finally had the chutzpah to go and said, Rebbe, very fresh state, who understands what you're saying? So he pointed, the Rebbe was standing at the back of the room, and said he understands. But the Rebbe said, so I'll tell you this what the Rebbe said at this Chafa of Farbrengen. The Rebbe brought a story from the Gemara. Rebbe Lazar said something in the marketplace, in the Beis Medrash, and he did not say it in the name of Rabbi Elkanah. Rabbi Elkanah got very upset, ikbid. And Reb Ami and Reb Asi tried to console him and said, Nish geferlich, don't worry, and they explained that he maybe said the vart a little differently. He was not happy. And someone else tried to explain to him, he was not happy. Finally, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi said, it says in the pasuk, Asher ksiva Hashem es Moshe avdai, kein siva Moshe es Yeshua, v'chein asi Yeshua. Anyway, Yeshua sat and taught Torah. Do you think that when Yeshua taught before every sentence he said, Kach limdani Moshe Rabbeinu? He would say it in Darshan, and everybody knew that it was all from Moshe Rabbeinu. Kach Elazar Talmidcha. He's sitting in the Beis Medrash and darshaning, but don't worry, everybody knows it's from you. That's the Gemara. The Rebbe quoted this Gemara and said, this is a Rebbe who was not a father. How much more so? I mean, he didn't finish the sentence, but how much more so by me that the Rebbe, that the Rebbe's father was his teacher, and that Sayi was his father, and Sayi was his primary teacher. There's somewhere where the Rebbe says that there's a minhag of fathers to teach, somewhere in a Sikha, it's a minhag of fathers to teach Likutei Torah to their children. As I state in the Sikha. So, actually, Rabbi Yitschok Dubov, well, I'm going to tell you a couple stories from him now. Rabbi Yitschok Dubov, I believe the way that he used to come to the Dnepropetrovsk in the summers was as follows. He was a Bachar and Timchit Tmimim in Lubavitch. I believe the reason that he came was he had a friend, another Bachar, who lived in the Dnepropetrovsk. So during Ben Azmanim, he would come with him, maybe during Yom Tov, he would come with his friend to the Dnepropetrovsk. So because of this, there's a number of stories of the Rebbe's father, of the Rebbe as a child that we know from him, and also of the Rebbe's father. And by the way, this is probably where Reb David Dubov gets his entire chayes. It's his zayda in the Rebbe's father's Torah. But anyway, so he came at 6 years old, and the Rebbe was 6 years old at the time. And he came to the house, and the Rebbe's father was teaching Likutei Torah to the three boys. The Rebbe was 6 years old. So he says, what are you doing? So he says, go ahead, for Harim. And he asked the Rebbe some shilas, and of course the Rebbe... There's another story from Rabbi Yitzchok Dubov, which goes as follows. He was a Bachar. And whenever they would come from Lubavitch, the Rebbe's father, who, as we said, was a tremendous makusher to the Rebbe Rashab, so he would make them a Kabbalah Spanim. The Bachrim would come to Tani, they're coming from Rebbe. And one time when they were sitting there, the mailman came in, and he brought a box and handed it to the Rebbe's father. And the Bachrim, being Bachrim, they happened to notice that the box is from the Rebbe Rashab. Okay, so he went to another room, he opened it up, they saw that it was Rebbe's clothing. So the Bachrim started trying to figure out they said, so does he send you boxes often? Does he send you gifts often? He said, from time to time. And do you ever send him gifts? Like they're trying to figure out what's going on. So he says, come, I'll show you my gift. And they follow him, and he opens the door crack, and the Rebbe was sitting and learning. He says, this is my gift to him. In 1920, Taf Reish Pei was basically, the communist revolution began in 1917, but it was pretty much complete by 1920, and that's when everything changed. Whereas what I was telling you about before, having the Shtella, and he was the official rabbi of the city and all these things, this was under the Tsars. But with the communist revolution, everything began to change. Persecution of religion, the rabbis were pashut, they would fire them, they would, if a rabbi would have to pay, a typical person would pay 5 rubles rent, a rabbi would have to pay 500 rubles rent. Geroidif to everybody as you can, and the noose got tighter and tighter and tighter, and he was the only one left standing, the Rebbe's father. The other one passed away, one disappeared, and you can't really blame them. And he as we know, he stood strong. Just a couple of the things, Rebbe Elkanah talks about how, under the pressure, in the situation, people would lose their jobs if they wouldn't go to work. So she says how Yom Kippur morning, early in the morning, he made a minyan for Shachris for the people who had to go to work. In Russia, Yom Kippur, even for the Frayin, Yom Kippur is Yom Kippur, but these people, they felt they didn't have a choice, so he made a minyan for them. There's a couple of interesting things like that, where we see things that kind of we know today, Chabad houses, whatever. The Rebbe grew up in a home where there was a mix of all different types of people, where l'chatchila his father was very, very much opposed. There were Freya people coming through the house, Fruma people coming through the house, Zionists, this, that, the other. They were all welcome. And I was telling you about the tremendous controversy when he became Rav. By the time of the Rebbe's bar mitzvah, which would be 4 years later, she says the whole city was already, everybody came to pay their respects. They had tremendous respect for the Rebbe's father. They embraced him. By the Rebbe's chasana, the whole city, all the shulin together write a beautiful letter of mazel tov to the Rebbe's parents, and you're serving us for 20 years. You don't only worry about our ruchnis, you worry about our gashmin. So obviously the entire community changed their tune, even the parts that had previously opposed them. Which again, to me, often reminds me of the way shluchim have it. Obviously, it was a bit of a different situation, but say that the Rebbe's house was a house with all different people coming through. Say with the opposition and then the embrace, v'chula. Anyway, this is obviously my own observation, and it's certainly subject to other people's opinions. Anyway. Now, the Rebbe's shidduch, the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin shidduch, Reb Zalman Duchman writes to the Rebbe, that Rebbetzin Schneerson told me, as that the Rebbe Rashab told her. Rebbetzin Schneerson is the Rebbe Rashab's Rebbetzin. She said that the Rebbe Rashab told her, for Musya, for the Rebbetzins, am trachten einer von the Rebbe's father's children, right? But there's more precision in that, and that is that the Rabbi Elkanah Landau said that the Rebbe Rashab specified that the Rebbe should marry the Rebbe. He said that for the Rebbetzin, it was the Rebbe. So the Rebbe Rashab picked out the shidduch of our Rebbe, the son of Chasidai Achi Masur, with the Rebbetzin. Anyway, so the wedding, we all know that they weren't present, the communists wouldn't let them go, and there's a whole number of letters from the Rebbe's father to the Rebbe, beautiful but heartbreaking letters about how much I want to be with you, but don't worry, Yaakov Avinu also, his parents were not there with him, but we're mamish like we're with you. But sometimes it just, in some of these letters comes out, oh, how much we wish we could be with you and see you. It's, the fact that he couldn't participate in the wedding where his son is marrying Frierdiker Rebbe's daughter and the chulu is... I wanted to just mention, he certainly bears this worth mentioning his name. The Rebbe's father had a brother, Reb Shmuel, who was married to Rebbe Simchana's sister. And he was also a Goyin Olam. And he came to Reb Zalman Vilenkin. He came when the Rebbe was 15, and he spoke to the Rebbe a little bit in learning. And he said, Reb Zalman, your Talmud is a Baki b'Shas in Shas, entire Shas Bavli with all the Taisvus in, and L'Kutei Torah with all the ayins, which is very similar to something that the Frierdiker Rebbe said on many occasions about the Rebbe when people would ask him about him, that he wears a short jacket, but he's Baki, and he said Bavli, Yerushalmi, Shas, he listed off a bunch of Rishonim, L'Kutei Torah with all the ayins, but this is interesting that it starts from the Rebbe's uncle, with whom, by the way, the Rebbe had a very close relationship. And he obviously, in addition to being a tremendous Talmud Chacham, he had a good sense of humor. So there's a number of letters from him about the chasana that they held in the Petrovsk during the Rebbe and the Rebbe's chasana in Warsaw, and some of it is funny. Chaim Shalbrook, my friend, says that the Rebbe Levi Yitschok was the first one to koch in the Rebbe's Torah. If you open up the Igris Kodesh of the Rebbe's father, you see that there's a constant correspondence between the Rebbe and him, going back and forth. Unfortunately, for the most part, we only have the Rebbe's father's part. But the pilpul that you wrote me on this Indian, this is very good, but I dispute this, and going on sometimes for 10 pages. There's one, many of them are straight up nigla. Some of them have Kabbalah mixed in, many of them are straight up nigla. There's one thing that he writes a letter, 10 pages, if you could be makdish a carbon, the machshava, or only b'dibur. The Rebbe is saying that you could be makdish it b'machshava. The Rebbe's father is saying you cannot actually make a kodesh machshava. You can only commit yourself if you may have a machshava. And they're going back and forth with rayas, from Shas and Paskin, whatever. 10-page letter from the Rebbe's father to the Rebbe on this topic, but you see that he's responding to the Rebbe. And what you wrote about this and this, and obviously don't think that when they're writing and learning, the Rebbe obviously holds his ground. It's interesting to see, because they're writing back and forth. It's not like, okay, my father said, so whatever, it's back and forth. Many inyanim that come up later in the Rebbe's sichas. Another example, Kam Rabbi Shachtel Reb Zayda, the story we know about Purim, that the Rabbi stood up and shechted Reb Zayda, so there's a letter from the Rebbe's father about it, saying, like we discussed when we were here, so he's writing to him on Purim, like we spoke about when you were here, this Indian, and he speaks about Rabbi and Reb Zayda, and their names, the Sheirish, what Rabbi means. Rabbi is Chsadim, Rabbi, right, Rav, a lot. Zayda is Zeira, small. And that's why he couldn't handle the Gila Likus, that's why he died. Anyway, but it's all in these letters, we see many of the Inyanim that the Rebbe himself speaks about. In 1930, Tuf Reish Tzadik, the communist government was pushing the rabbis in each of the countries of the USSR to write public letters that the government is supportive of Yiddishkeit and of religion, and they did it already in some of the countries. In Belarus, it was 30 big rabbanim signed such a thing, and they made a V'ida Sarabanim in Kharkov. And it's very interesting that just now the city of Nikolaev is about to publish a book about their most famous citizen, the history of their most famous citizen, and many of the things they have there from government archives and documents, because it's the official archive of the city of Nikolaev that's publishing it. And there I saw that they talk about this thing in Kharkov, and he was even called to meet the prime minister of Ukraine at the time, who tried pressuring him to sign this thing that they wanted all the Rabbanim to sign. Anyway, long story short, he's in Kharkov for a couple of weeks for this Vidas Rabbanim. Now, Reb Nachum Goldschmidt, who was a friend of the Rebbe's brother Label, he was from the he was a bacher from the Nef Petrov, so obviously he knew the Rebbe's father. They were hiding out in the Weiber Shul learning smicha. The lights were off. Obviously they had to hide away from the government. Again, this is communist times. And the Rebbe's father is visiting the city. So the Elter Bacher, I don't remember his name, but the Elter Bacher, who was serving as their mashgiach, went to bring the Rav to Faher the Bachrim. So he says, we were sitting and learning, and in walks the Rebbe's father. He says it was the room lit up. That's the way he felt it. He right away jumped up. He knew who the Rebbe's father was. And anyway, he sat down and he fahered the Bachrim. Within a few minutes, he started giving the Bachrim pilpul. In Indian and Melicha, what Melicha is Al Pi Kabbalah, what Shriya and Hadacha and Al Pi Kabbalah, and why the Taz, I don't remember, it's been a long time since I learned Smicha, but there's a fundamental machlekes between the Taz and the Shach, something related to Melicha. He says the Taz holds like this because Sherish Nishmasa is that, and the Shach holds like this because Gematria this. Within 5 minutes he lost them. But he gave, his Faher turned into, he gave an Indian. Now, after he finished, so the Bacher from his city, Reb Nachum Goldschmidt, and this Elter Bacher walked him back to his hotel. They escorted him back. So on the way, he said to the Bachrim, do you know why I'm here? There's a Vidas Rabbanim. They want us to sign something, and I'm not sure what to do. Should we sign because that maybe will make them more friendly toward religion, more supportive of it? Or maybe I shouldn't because it's a lie and they're only going to use it to worse. The one part of the story I can't really understand is Rebbe's father was a Malach Elikim. The way that the description, whatever you read about him or hear about him, that he's talking to these Bachrim on the way, but obviously he wanted them to know for some reason. Anyway, they come into the hotel room with him, they escort him up to the hotel room, he sits down at the desk, puts his head in his hands, and he's going back and forth. And he's getting very agitated and worked up. Finally, they said to him, Rebbe, after like there's a chtzug. So he gave a look at the bed and said, I don't know who slept there. I'm not going to lay down there. He was in the city for 2 weeks. Yesh Lahashvais, when the Rebbe was in Paris, in Tafshin Zayin, there were certain chassidim who used to visit him every day and would follow him everywhere. There were a couple of chassidim who did that. And they noticed that the Svarim on the Rebbe's bed did not move from day to day. So we say that the Rebbe's Kaddish, Mibeten and Mileda, you know, a little bit of the Rebbe's father's... there was something I wanted to say, I can't miss it, when I was telling you about the exchanges between them. Yutes Tevis Tafrish Sadik Vav. The Rebbe's father writes a letter, Ahuvay Machmadei V'yikirai B'ni V'kalasi Sheyichyu. My dear beloved son and daughter-in-law, I received your letters. Thank you. He writes the Inyan, the Rebbe, I got your the Inyan about Rosh Hashanah and Tashlich, together with your Chidush Torah that you said during Tishrei. And then he says, Bidvara Chidush Torah Shelcha, Ein Daiti Kedaitcha, Ma She'ata Maktin Es Atzmecha, V'Kaisev She'ein B'hem Shum Chidush. Lo Kein B'ni, Im Katen Ata B'Einecha, Haloi Rosh Chulu. The end of the pasuk is Reish Shifte Yisrael Ata. Heim Atoivim Ma'oid, Umchuvanim Ela Emes Bichlal. B'im Chacham B'ni Yismach Li B'Gamani Rak Yoser Tavlin Tzorich B'am. You need to add spice to them. What does that mean? Masha Kasafti L'Chamikvar, that you need more Yesodis of Kabbalah in them. And get used to putting more Kabbalah into your Inyani Torah that you write, because then everything comes out perfectly and round. And, you know, obviously the Rebbe had his derech, the Rebbe's father had his derech, but this is one of the many, many letters. The Rebbe said, there's the well-known story of the Mashgichim. I'm fast-forwarding now all the way to 1938, 1939. There's the well-known thing about matzah. I once heard in a sikha, I was not able to find it in Anacha, but I know I heard it in a recording. Could be it didn't make it to Anacha. That mitzvah, that matzah was the mitzvah of the Rebbe. The Rebbe says about his father that matzah was his mitzvah, that Avizoi brought tfei. And when you look at the interrogations, matzah is something that's coming up, about how he threatened the authorities with the matzah. Anyway, one of the stories was that when he was mashgiach on the matzah, long story short, he went to the president, the prime minister of the entire USSR, and he got special permission to make matzah. L'poil, that year is the year he was arrested, right before Pesach, partially because of this. But one of the things was that there was a train of wheat. The wheat was very valuable. There was a train of wheat that went under a bridge. And the mashgiach who was on the train saw that there was water dripping from the bridge. So he took an entire train of grain and said, wonderful. By the way, there was absolutely, people were starving to death then in Ukraine, just so you understand. The Russians, once they conquered Ukraine, I'll just give you a little bit of history. Ukraine is the breadbasket of Russia. That's where, like, the wheat, huge, but the people in Ukraine, millions of peasants starved to death because the Central Russian government didn't mind if they died, and they took all the grain to Moscow, to the big cities in Russia. And another one of the things that Stalin did, I found it interesting, obviously terrible and cruel, but they would put, in order to show foreigners how much Breitkeit there is in Russia, they would put dozens and dozens of trains full of grain near the borders as people were coming into Russia with huge signs, grain that's being exported from the plentiful Russian whatever to other countries, while millions of people were dying from hunger. The actual people who were in the places where the wheat was grown. Anyway, stop. So anyway, he threw out a whole train worth of wheat. So I'm going to jump forward to his arrest. It was Tes Nissen Taf Reish Tzadik Tes. So Matal Garari, who was with us on the trip, told us a word that he heard from somebody who heard it directly from the Rebbe's father. As he was on the way out, he was arrested. And again, I'm not going to tell the whole story of the arrest. The Rebbe Zechana writes about this very, very at length, and it's fascinating. I'm not going to tell the whole story here, but it's very easy. You can read up online. They were published over the last few years in English. As he was on the way out, there was this Yid was there. His name was Tversky. He later became a rabbi in a hospital not far from here, and he told it to Matal Garari. The Rebbe's father said to a few people who were standing there, "Al yipater adam mechavere elam dvar halacha." Shouldn't take leave without saying a dvar Torah. So he says, keep this message. The Torah ends with a lamed, and it starts with a beis, lev. Okay, the letter before beis is an aleph. The letter before lamed is a chaf, ach. Achin, kol achin b'Torah miyutin. Ach, right, is excluding something, minimizing something. After beis comes gimel. after the Beis Bereshis comes Gimel. After the Lamed of Leini Kol Yisrael comes Men. Gam. Kol Ribuyim Sheb'Torah. So if you go forward, it's a Ribuy. You're including something more, right? So you have Ach and Gam. Some Yidden know more. Some Yidden know less. Some Yidden have Miyutim. Some have Ribuyim, right? But remember, Echad Amar B'Echad Amamit V'vad Sheyichaven Liba L'Shamayim. Anyway, this is what he said on the way out. The interrogation lasted about 5 to 6 months, and here is where there's no doubt about it. He was absolutely tortured. He was beaten. There's a whole circle of people in Dnepropetrovsk who were arrested trying to get evidence against him. If you read the transcripts, in fact, the person who was in charge, the main interrogator in charge of the Rebbe's father's case for a while in one of the prisons. He was in 5 different prisons during this period. So what happens is that the first few, they try and make the case against you. Obviously, there's got to be a case before they send you away. So the first 5 months, he was moving from prison to prison. The main interrogator was later himself imprisoned for being so brutal in his interrogations. And the other people from Dnepropetrovsk who were arrested were beaten to give admissions about what the Rebbe's father did. So here they had in their hands a relative of the Frierdiker Rebbe who had gotten away from them because of international pressure, somebody whose son was married to the Frierdiker Rebbe's daughter, same last name, a Chashav Rav, and they were trying to do whatever they could to try to catch him. And part of because he wouldn't admit, so they brought the people who Vayochel admitted already. They arranged face-to-face confrontations. Right when they saw him, they said everything they said was not true. But you can't. I mean, these people were beaten to no end and tortured. So it's 2 years later. So there's a Rav named Rabbi Aaron Chaim Diskin. 2 years later, he was in that prison. First of all, he was in the prison the same time as the Rebbe's father. But he came through one of the prisons 2 years later, and amongst the Goyim, the Rebbe's father was a legend as the only one who didn't break under their brutal methods. And people who shared cells with him, because they were Chassidim all the way, as you can imagine, through the prison system, there were different people who shared, a cell wasn't 2-3 people, a cell was many, many people, some of the time. Sometimes you had 4 people, but there were the stories, the Agadah, the legends about him were going between the Goyim. Even one guy said, Rabbi Elkanah writes, he saved a couple of his cellmates from committing suicide. Other people spoke about what kind of strong and committed person. So anyway, also Rabbi Diskin himself was once there at the same time. He asked to be moved to cell 6. So he asked the inspector, whatever. So he said, "You're going to die before I move you together with the rabbi." They knew everybody, they wanted to be able to be with him. But the lower pocket said, that guy, he's the guy who won't sign anything. He's a real hero, because everybody who comes through here, signs what they want to do. Anyway, Tafshin Yud Gimel, this Rabbi Diskin came here and told Rabbi Elkanah some of the stories. And a short while later, the Rebbe asked him if he would stand up and say some things at the Chaf of Tafshin Yud Gimel at the Fabrengen about his father. So Rabbi Elkanah asked him, please don't say, how bad it was, just tell a couple of little things. Rabbi Elkanah, who was with the Rebbe's father afterwards, was always trying to shield the Rebbe from, the full extent of what went on there. But he got up during the Fabrengen and he started telling a few stories, Lamashal, that he told the interrogators. One time they took him on Motzei Shabbos, and he said he's not going to speak to them until he gets 2 matches to do by Meriah Ish. He told that and another couple things, and the Rebbe was crying and crying and crying so much the Chassidim were near him, begged him to stop talking. But that was just the not extreme stories at all.
Is there a recording of that?
Tafshin Yud Gimel is the 1 year that has only, I think, 1 Fabrengen. It was recorded. We know it was recorded, but the tapes have not yet been found. It's Purim Yud Gimel, the famous thing with Hurrah, with Stalin. It's not on tape. Anyway, by the way, some of these interrogations, they have the time that they start and they finish. 16 hours, 12 hours, 10 hours, 6 hours, and they're not like they're sitting across the table having a conversation. 16 hours straight, 14 hours straight, and that's how they break people. So it's just, anyway. Rabbi Elkanah, when she finally saw, at the end of the day, they say, we recommend that the prosecutor, that there should not be a public trial, but it has to be decided by, the secret committee in Moscow. That is a code word for saying we were not able to get him to admit anything. knows they wanted to make a public trial. They liked making show trials and convicting everybody, getting everybody swept up with whatever he said they couldn't. So they was sent to Moscow, and he was sentenced to 5 years in Golus. So Rebbe Elkanah, not going to go into the whole arichas, but she tried finding for all these months where he was, bringing him food. They played with her, they lied to her, they sent her here or there. Anyway, finally she got to see him before he went. And right when she saw him, the first thing he asked was, Nissen has 1 day Rosh Chodesh or 2, Kislev is 1 day Rosh Chodesh or 2 days. He wanted to know, obviously, the Kviyas, that was one thing. Was it Kislev or Nissen? No, Kislev, I believe. Somebody would know which one are they both shaykh to have 1 day or 2 days? Anyway, whatever it is. And then he started crying. First of all, she said she didn't recognize him. He was so, what they did to him in that time, she couldn't recognize him, let alone 5 years after that, when there were other people who saw him. On the train ride to get where he was going, there was no water, almost no water for 11 days. And they would give the prisoners a little bit of a sip, and every time, this is obviously what he told her, or maybe there were other people with him, because there were a few times where there were other Yidden or Chassidim with him who observed, and later told the Rebbe Elkanah that every time they would give water, he would give away his bread to the guard to get more water, and he would use it for until Yadayim. Now, just so you understand how remote, okay, there's also a whole thing of the Rebbe, how desperately the Rebbe tried to save him. Again, I don't know why I'm being meirich in this, but to me, understanding a little bit the type of pain that the Rebbe felt throughout this period and afterwards about this whole thing is whatever. Although it's painful to think about and to know, but I feel like it's something we should at least try and understand what the Rebbe himself was going through. Rebbe Elkanah says that one of the letters they got in Golus there, where the Rebbe says to her, "I'm never going to forgive myself for leaving you behind." So anyway, the place where he was in Golus was a terrible place. They were starving. They lived in mamish a shack with almost no shelter. They just left them there on their own to fend for themselves. It's 1,400 miles from Almaty. Almaty is the bigger city in Kazakhstan. 3 days train from there in the middle of nowhere. And they didn't need any guards because there was nowhere you could go. You could run hundreds of miles in any direction, and there was no other town or city or whatever. And the Rebbe explains, a couple times on Chavav, how Golus is worse than Misa. And he speaks about how the Beis Yosef wanted to be Zoicha, to die al Kiddush Hashem, because he did a little something wrong. The Eibusher took away from him that schus. And after that, he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. But the death al Kiddush Hashem would have been even greater than that. But the Eibusher took away from. Basically, the Rebbe says a few times. I believe it's a few times, but certainly more than one time, on Chavav about his father, that he passed away in Golus, and Golus is worse than Misa, and basically he died al Kiddush Hashem. And I will just share with you, so those are a few vignettes from the Rebbe's father's life. There's an unbelievable Rishima where he writes about his imprisonment, and 23 diyukim, his name, how many prisons he was in, the date that he was transferred from one prison to another, his mother's name, 23 different things about his episode of being arrested and sent to Almaty that he explains al pi Kabbalah. Why it was this day, and where Shmi Roim is al Gvuris, and my mother's name is Meir al Gvuris, and you have to imamtik the Gvuris, and he says it's for sure, I'll call, the Rebbe says it, so that's a chatoy v'avoynei upshoy, so he says how humble he was on the one hand. On the other hand, the Rebbe, there's many sichas about this one Rishim. The other hand, it starts with the words Ani Levi Yitschok ben Zelda Rachel, and he writes like Bekitzer, the main parts of his arrest and what dates he moved from one place to another, and why he was in 5 prisons, and the date that he was sent to Almaty, the date that he got there. 23 different things al pi Kabbalah. So the Rebbe says basically that shows what level, what type of person he was. Everything from tzaddikim is from on high, but literally every single detail. The Frierdiker Rebbe wrote an obituary. Most people don't know this. The Frierdiker Rebbe wrote an obituary for the Rebbe's father. It's in Yiddish. I'll read it. I just find it very interesting, and we'll finish with that. I don't know if anybody wants to ask any questions or to hear more afterwards, but I was told an hour. So I believe the 3 minutes will take me to read this will be exactly an hour or so. So this was published in Kovetz Lubavitch, written by the Frierdiker Rebbe, although it was anonymous. At the time, nobody knew it. Yiddish is okay?
Translate.
Okay. And that'll make it to an hour, because it's really more than 3 minutes. Donnershik Chav Ches Menachem Av is der halten geworden zu Chasne de Bein Nesia, Harav, the Rebbe's name, Schneerson, telegrafisch die treuerige Idee wegen der Ptire von seinem größten Vater, Rabbi Goin, Rabbi Chassid, am Forsim, Rabbi Levi Yitschok Schneerson, Nishmas Eden, welches Nifter geworden, Shabbos Chav Gimel Menachem Av Tafshin Daled. Der Yom Ptire ist nicht ganz sicher. In der Stadt Almaty, Kasachstan in Russland. Die Ptire von Größen, Goin und Chassid hat reisgerufen, erschütternden Eindruck bei alle Chassidei Chabad. Thursday, the 28th of Menachem Av, Chasna de Benesia, the Rebbe's son-in-law, our Rebbe, was notified by telegram the tearful news about the passing of his father, Goin, a Chassid, a Meforsim, Nishmas Eden, who passed away on Shabbos Chav Gimel Av, although it says right there that the Yom HaPtir is, no, we're not 100% sure that's the right day. It wasn't. He passed away on Chav Av. In the city Almaty, Kazakhstan. The Ptira of this great Goin and Chassid called out a tremendous response by all Chassidei Chabad. Rabbi Levi Yitschok Schneerson is given an einikel, Bigazach, Vekdush, Rabbi Chassid, Baruch Shalom, Nishmas Eden von Vekdush Admor Tzemach Tzedek. Und ist geboren Chai Nissen Tafish Lamed Ches bei seinem Vater Rabbi Chassid Baruch Schneer, welches gewinnt an Edem von Grayson Gewir und Chassid Reb Zalman Chaikin from Padabranka. He was born, he was an Einikel of the Tzemach Tzedek, and it goes through his lineage of his tremendous ancestors. Schein in seinem frister Jugend hat der Rabbi Levi Yitschok Schneerson herausgewiesen seltene iluyische Geschreines. Hat gelernt bei der Padabranka Rav Rabbi Goin, Rabbi Chassid, Meforsim Rabbi Yoel Chaikin. Okay, now we got it right. It was his uncle that was the Rav and his teacher as a child, and his Zayda was the Gvir. Welches gewinnt hat Talmud Muvak von Rabbi Chassid an Neder Pesach Malastavker von die Chassidim am Forsamen bei Chweiktush Ad Morazak in Nishmas Eden. Rabbi Levi Yitschok Schneerson gewinnt an Edem von Agoin Rabbi Chassid Meir Shlomi Yanovsky in Nishmas Eden Nikolayev Rav. Rabbi Levi Yitschok Schneerson hat bekommen Smicha von die Geoine Adar in seiner Zeit, wie Agoin Reb Chaim Brisker Zal, Agoin Reb Eliyachaim Meisler Zal von Lodge und azay weiter. In Jahr Tafresh Samach Tes nimmt Rabbi Levi Yitschok Schneerson sein erster Rabbanus, die größte Stelle in Yekaterinoslav, Ukraine, wo es verblieben die ganze Zeit. Rabbi Levi Yitschok Schneerson ist gewähnt, äußerst ein größer Geoinus in Teira Niglis, euch Abaki Nifle in Sifrei HaKabbalah, a tiefer Maskil in Chassidus Chabad, a seltener Yerushalayim und Balmidas Tevis. Es gewähnt von den Chassidim am Forsamen beim Lubavitcher Rebbe, meaning the Rebbe Rashab, welcher hat ihm stark Mekarev und Mechabev gewähnt. Von Jahr Tafresh Samach Beis hat der Rebbe Levi Yitschok Anteil genommen in alle Asifes Binyanei Klavas der Lubavitcher Rebbe in Nishmas Eden und verrufen. A größten Anteil hat der Rebbe Levi Yitschok genommen in der Matzah-Aktie von den Soldaten in the Japanese-Russian War in the Jahr Tafresh Samach Dal Samach Hey, die euch in der Materialsammlung for to defend Beilis during the blood libel. Hat der Rebbe Yitschok euch genommen dem größten Anteil bei sorgen die Pleite Polen in Lita, handling the refugees that came to Yekaterinoslav during World War I. Später, he got very involved in the Torah and Kala Arbit of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, meaning the Rebbe Rashab, with the most mesirus nefesh. During his Rabbanus in Yekaterinoslav, he did much for Achzakas Ayados and Yonei Klal. The last few years, see here, they don't write that he was sent to Golis, probably because Rebbe Tzimchana was still stuck in Russia. And you don't call attention to the fact that he was a prisoner and he was convicted and all these things. I'm guessing this is why. It says the last number of years, Rebbe Levi Yitschok was forced to wander together with his family, meaning Rebbe Tzimchana, to a very remote city in Kazakhstan, and it had a bad effect on his health, and he left over many ksavim and nigla and Kabbalah. The Frierdiker Rebbe wrote this entire thing with his own hand. We have to end off on a happy note. First of all, okay, this is Nigun, which is this is a Nigun that the Rebbe was mechaviv, and we all know it well. Yadada, yadada, hey, yadada, yadada, hey, yadada, yadada, hey, yadada, yadada, hey, ay, 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 ay,
Yes. Ask a question.
Yes, sir.
Being that you know about a lot of history,
Do you know anything about that? That they wanted him to be a Rav in Milwaukee, and do you know what happened? Why it didn't work out?
Milwaukee?
You ever heard about it?
Yes, he grew up.
No. I'm so serious. That the Rebbe's father, they wanted him to become a Rav.
Boston was one of the places he got.
Did you know anything about it, or?
I've been living in Milwaukee for 45 years, and I haven't yet heard this.
I heard, but and in other words, one of the cities in America, they wanted to be Rav there,
Okay.
and
You're not talking about the Frierdiker Rebbe.
I'm
was
talking
considered
about the
moving to
Levi
Milwaukee.
Yitschok. Do you know anything about it? If
Nope.
you know it, no.
But I'd be absolutely fascinated to learn
But you
more
heard about
this.
Boston? What did you
No,
say?
Boston was one of the places that...
What, originally,
You
before
mean
you
Frierdiker Rebbe you're talking about?
Would you mind if
What, without United?
Yeah.
We have to have night.
After my...
Yisrael Meir says we should
I
do it
am
after
not
night.
running anywhere. I'll stay.
Your